welcome back to my channel. My name is Becca. Today we are going to be building some DIY cedar fence picket garden beds. I'm super excited to tackle this project. My husband had an idea and I was like, this is amazing. I've actually seen it already. So I went to Lowe's. You guys were with me. We walked into the store. I got a few fence pickets and 2x4. We are literally racing the rain as far as staining, getting them in the ground, getting them filled. I want these done by the time that this storm passes so that we can start planting. We have a ton of seedlings that are ready to get into the ground pretty shortly. So I'm going to go ahead and just walk you through kind of what we're using. I'm going to cut up some boards and then we will start assembling. This is a very easy project. It takes minimal time. It's super inexpensive. I think for these two 6x3 beds or 3x6 beds, we're all under, I want to say around $50 or $54. So it's super inexpensive.
Baby, I've been thinking about the things we said. Oh yeah. And maybe we'd be better off being just friends. Oh yeah. It's getting kinda obvious what you want from me. Only calling when you feel alone. You make promises, then you.
So heading into Lowe's, we are going to pick up quite a few fence pickets. I think I ended up with 16. I'm not quite sure. You can do the beds at least 2 boards high. You can do 1 board high. You can do 3 boards high, 4 boards high. It totally depends on how high you want them, how far you want to kneel down, if you're going to finish them with an edge. There's so many different options. There's cedar, there's redwood, there's treated, non-treated. Do your research, use what you can or use what's in your budget. My husband pointed out these boards and they're beautiful. They're huge. You could literally just use these. I liked that they were almost the same size as 2 fence panels stacked on top of each other, but they were a little bit more pricey and I had a budget I wanted to stick to, so we are going to go ahead and go with the cheapest option. You can leave these natural, you can stain them, do what you like. Don't forget to check, there is always a coal cart, and I believe this is actually just wood that's deemed not the best to sell, or maybe wood that has been cut and people decide, well, I don't want that anymore. There's so many times I've digged in these piles and you can find some pretty good looking wood. If you don't have access to a saw, or you just honestly don't want to deal with it, or you have problems getting it in your car, don't forget that Lowe's and I believe Home Depot will actually cut the wood for you. So if you have the time, wait around and have them cut it to the size you need, or just, you know, you can buy them. It's not the most cost effective, but it is a little bit easier if that's something you're looking to get done quickly. I picked up 1.5 inch screws, or my husband did. This is totally optional when you go to put these boards together. I've watched so many different videos. A lot of people will either cut this part of the picket fence panel off just to make it a straight edge. I think I maybe did 3 or 4, and I was outside with my husband and he's like, you know, that's really not necessary. I don't think it's going to matter in the long run. So I was like, you know what? Let's not do it, because, you know, 14 or 15 times I honestly just wanted and needed these to be built today. Again, we were chasing the storm, so do with what is going to work best for you in your garden space. We have quite a bit of space, so I honestly wanted as much length that I could get out of these boards as possible. So I ended up doing a 6x3, and you can cut these to size. I wanted them to be honestly as simple as I could go as far as the project is concerned. I love a good DIY, but I actually also love DIYs that are quick and simple and don't require a ton of extra steps. So I wanted to keep the measurements for these beds extremely simple, so we just went with a simple 6x3. The long side, of course, is going to be 6 feet, basically a whole panel, and then the shorter sides were basically the boards cut in half. I screwed these into the 2x4s on the shallower side. I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm not a professional, so if you can catch on with the video, then hopefully I'm showing it here correctly. And then I was just going to make sure that the longer side board, you'll see here in a second, it matches up with the edge of the shorter side that we cut. So I was playing around with doing them 2 boards high, and then my husband was like, well, if you're going to do it, you might want 3 high eventually in the long run. There are quite a few plants that we plan on growing, you know, different seasons throughout the year that need more than 12 inches of soil, and we are actually putting these in the ground. Otherwise, I would suggest cutting your 2x4s a little bit shorter, but I wanted to make sure that these truly weren't going anywhere. We had a huge storm this last month, and our backyard was just flooded in certain areas with so much water, which isn't always going to be in the forecast, but I wanted to make sure that the work and the money that we're putting into the soil in these beds is going to be there for the long run. So I'm going to go ahead and get these together. Honestly, this took little to no time, and we did this outside. Our kids were playing. It was maybe like an hour and a half, give or take a break. And my husband was working, so I was using a random bucket to just kind of eyeball things. If you can see here, I'm making sure that the edge lines up with the edge of the other board, so the 2x4 acts as a wonderful brace. I have seen videos where people have used, I believe it's a 1x2, but I wanted something that was a little bit thicker and a little bit stronger, again, because I don't want these to go anywhere. So if in the future I ever have to shore these up with an extra piece of wood, I feel like maybe a different board or something, I have a little bit more leeway screwing that in. So if these rot, I feel like I'll have an extra year or two to add on to that before dismantling these and going with something a little bit more sturdy. But I am extremely excited. Seeing these being put together is like music to my ears. We have had 2 of the smaller beds. I think we got them at Costco a few years ago, and this year I just kind of want to go all in. This is girl math at its finest. I eyeballed the middle of these longer sides, the 6-foot sides, and I just decided that was where the middle brace is going to go. You can brace across. You can put some sort of bottom in these. We are not doing that. I want to use the dirt that's in our yard, but I'm going to end up putting wire mesh in the bottom of these. Later, we have a huge mole problem in our backyard. They eat everything. There's one particular side of our fence where they've literally just destroyed root systems of fruit trees we had. So I want to make sure that I protect against anything digging up through the beds, but I still want to give access to the worms. So I'm going to just use 2x4s in the middle, because the 6-foot span of one board I feel like is going to get wonky and potentially bow with the amount of soil that we're putting in here. So here's how they turned out. The 3 high, I love the look. I think it's beautiful. I am actually going to stain these just to make sure I can get as much weather out of them, and I kind of want them to match a little bit of our garden. So here is the wire. I didn't use chicken wire. I wanted something that like a rodent or a mole, anything couldn't get through, so I went with the, I think it was 1/4 of an inch. They're super tiny, and it was kind of a pain to cut, but I feel like in the long run this is definitely going to save me a lot when it comes to the garden. I feel like this year is the foundation of the actual garden area that I'm going to be able to grow food in long term. The last few years we've been working on the backyard orchard and planting fruit trees. They say that, you know, planting a tree, the best time to do that was last year, you know, a minute ago, what have you. So we are finally moving into the space that I can turn into a larger growing space, and I'm super excited, but I want to make sure that everything is done correctly. So if you have a problem with anything getting into your beds, or you think you may have some sort of animal that will dig, definitely do your due diligence. It is kind of a pain, and it's not something that was fun. I'll say that putting this wire mesh in the bottom was absolutely the longest part of building these beds. It takes a little bit of maneuvering, and make sure that you have some really good music. Put on, you know, your sun hat and get outside. It'll take a little bit of time, but I promise you, I feel so good when I put these in the ground. I would say a piece of advice, my husband came out and he was like, hey, you know, the turf isn't level, so my beds are not 100% level. If you are going to build these, make sure that you're on a flat surface or use a leveler. I knew we were going to dig these and put them into the ground anyway, so I can level them on my own based on the holes that we're digging. So I wasn't too concerned about that, but it would have made it easier in the long run. So I'm going to get all of this mesh put in here. I feel like the longest wire mesh I found at Lowe's, I think this is a 1/4 inch, so really nothing can get through here. I feel like the worms potentially, I'm hoping, crossing my fingers, they'll still be able to get up through the bottom here. I'm going to cut out the weed screen that you see at the bottom. So it was basically just a hair wide enough to fit across, so I could barely staple it to either side. And then you'll see all of these extra little pieces. This was kind of the hardest part for me. It was cutting all these little strips, and then you'll see later that I take pieces of wire and just kind of tie them together, for lack of a better term. So you see here it fits, but then there are still gaping holes that I am just genuinely not interested in. When you think about the garden, it's beautiful and it's fun, but I'm really trying to make sure that I get the soil right this year. Where there was a gaping hole or this was actually falling out, you could see that something could still get through. I just used a little pieces of wire and basically tied these together to make sure that if anything did try to climb through here, they would be stuck and couldn't get into any of the plants themselves. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish that up. This took a little bit of time. Again, take your time. I feel like the wire was the most tedious part. Nothing crazy, but it took some time. So here's how the beds turned out. I did go ahead and stain these extremely dark. They're gonna weather. I like the darker look. A lot of the accent pieces that we have, like our gazebo and furniture and another gazebo we're building for the pool and patio, all of those things are going to be on the darker side. So part of me loves the natural wood. I think it was beautiful and I kind of regret staining these. So if I have any advice, definitely 1, don't use a paintbrush to stain. 2, take your time and kind of sit with it for a while, because I shocked myself when I stepped back. I was like, wow, that's really dark. It's really pretty, but I think I'm going to end up building another one. I have a ton of extra wood lying around the yard and leave that one as a natural wood element. But I love how these turned out. They are so deep and spacious. So now we're going to dig the holes. I'm basically just going to cut the weed screen and then dig the holes and sink this into the ground. I'm excited. I can finally put up a cattle panel trellis. I have places for my tomatoes and my pumpkins and just all of the things that are going to need a larger trellis. I feel like this is going to be so much fun. So here is, I think maybe 2 or 3 days later, we dug the holes and they are pretty deep, and you'll see it was just kind of a guessing game for me. I didn't really measure anything, but that's the fun in it. Sometimes you just wing it and go with it. It was a fun project. So I'm going to use the leftover dirt obviously to backfill the holes, but I just truly wanted to make sure that this wasn't going anywhere. With the amount of dirt that we're putting in here, I would hate to see that wash away again. You can see back where the redwoods are, they line our back fence, and oh my gosh, it was such a sad day. There's so much landscaping that is just, it's a hot mess back there. So redoing that is going to be a whole nother project. I obviously dug the holes a little bit too far in, so it's just a little bit of figuring out what hole needs to be deeper, which one needs to be a little bit wider. And so I'm going to finish that, get these in the ground, and then we will move on.
If you just wanna have my body, you better go find somebody else.
Gardening style would definitely lean towards chaos gardening. That's what I've done the last 2 years. I just put stuff in the ground and hope it pops up. I don't particularly pay attention to the seasons. I do, but not 100%. And this year I'm trying really hard to make sure I companion plant correctly and plant things, you know, with the correct season and in the right time. And so I'm really hoping that my garden plan this year is actually going to work. We have quite a few seedlings. We winter sowed. I'll show you here in a second what's popped up in our little trial garden area. It's always meant to be a pollinator garden for our fruit trees and things like that, but it's just kind of turned into a bed of surprise. I don't know what's going to pop up or when. We've had carrots and radishes and pole beans, zinnias, a ton of zinnias. We have so many things. Tomatoes, I have tomatoes popping up in there, and it's really fun. But I would love to know that when I plant something, when it's going to pop up, when it's ready to be harvested. So let me know any of your planning advice down below, because I've tried several different apps. I've tried planning on paper and pen, and I can't seem to find my style. So I'm still working on that. Here is quite a few that we planted this last weekend. Again, we were kind of chasing a storm, so I didn't have any time to film this, but just an update on my garden. I like to film these, one, so I have a backlog to look at how our trees are growing and how things have progressed in the backyard. That Meyer lemon tree is new. There had been so many lemons on that tree, and my husband's been asking for more citrus, so we picked one up. That was I think a Washington navel, the seedless orange. This is our apricot tree. If you have one or any experience with them, please let me know why this is constantly producing that sap. We haven't had a harvest. I think this is our 2nd year, so hopefully we will be able to harvest from the apricot tree. This is our donut peach tree. Beautiful peaches. This is a new, I think this is a pear tree. I'm not sure. I'll show you here in a second. Yeah, so this is the pear tree. We picked this up, and these were bare root trees. We've never purchased bare root before, but I'm super excited. One, because I feel like you get a little bit of a discount, but they looked really healthy. And we live in a small town, and so the nursery supplier that we go to is absolutely amazing. This is another cherry tree. We are trying another one. We had one planted over on the fence, and we have a metal fence, and I think the tree just got burned by the sun. There's quite a bit going on in here. We planted a ton of potatoes. My oldest son wanted to do an experiment. He watched a video, I think with James Pierogi. I don't know if I'm saying his name right. Last name, and he planted potatoes in a bucket. My sons were fascinated. We planted blueberries. This was a very busy planting weekend. So I have 2 different types of blueberries in there. If you plant blueberries, please pick up 2. I coincidentally did that. I did not know you actually needed 2 to pollinate, so cross your fingers. We have a Nanking cherry, raspberry, dewberry. This one I don't think is going to make it. It snapped, but it's still green inside, so we're crossing our fingers. And then here is our winter sowing. Some of these jugs look amazing, and some of them I don't have any hope for, but I am going to open these on camera just so that maybe some of my mistakes you can learn from. I've never done this before. I'm extremely intrigued by the idea. And honestly, we didn't have the time to put up a greenhouse this year. A greenhouse is just something that I want to plan correctly, a final house for one. We've had quite a few of the pop-up ones over the years, and they just don't last. I haven't had great success with them. So here's just an update on our pollinator garden. I have had a plethora of zinnias that popped up, a ton of wildflowers, and I get all of my wildflower seeds from Dollar Tree. Amazing success with them. I cannot wait for the mammoth sunflowers to pop up. Those are going to be absolutely gorgeous. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. I would love if you stick around. I don't know if I was actually supposed to keep these inside. We purchased these from Tractor Supply, and my husband has been talking about planting berries since we moved into our house, and this is like year 3 already. So I feel like we're a little bit late, but you know, you should have started yesterday. So start today. These are pretty reasonably priced, so I feel like hopefully, I'm crossing my fingers they make it. We have blackberry bushes that pop up everywhere in our yard, so I was like, you know what, we'll just take one out of the ground and try that. The Nanking cherry looked really intriguing to me. We looked it up, and it seems like it's something you can use for pies. We planted quite a few grapevines, and I'll show those here in a few days. I have another update to the garden and some new stuff that we're planting, but right after we planted these and put everything in the ground, it started to rain, and then we got a snowstorm. So I don't know if these are going to make it. I was reading online. If you have any advice, let me know that they actually should have been kept inside for a few more weeks. I'm not sure. We are going to make a special bed for asparagus, and then we're also going to be planting onions coming up. I will see you guys in the next video. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it or if you learned something. Thank you so much for hanging out.